Liberal Fox News commentator Marie Harf no doubt made her colleague, Jessica Tarlov, very proud when she single-handedly shut down a MAGA panel and their bad faith talking points about Vice President Kamala Harris and which party has the better record of taking care of American families. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to talk about in this video. Marie Harf is somebody we've occasionally talked about in previous videos. Jessica Tarlov is, of course, our queen here at Pondering Politics. She is the best and brightest that Fox has to offer. Marie Harf is very, very good as well. And she frequently appears as the token liberal on panels like Outnumbered, occasionally The Five, and she does an excellent job. And this is one such example where she fact checks her MAGA co-host about Vice President Harris's recent interview and her policy positions, and again, which party does a better job of taking care of American families.
Marie, do you have any concerns? You know, it's been this 40 days and you climb higher and higher up the mountain, the greater the fall, that there's so great of an expectation on this interview that this is where we see the polls change.
Well, look, I think the reason she is now leading in most national and battleground state polls is because she actually is talking to the American people. She is doing voter events across the battleground states, not just these big rallies, but also meeting with voters at local diners and on the campaign trail. And they like what they're seeing. And look, she doesn't need hand-holding. I guarantee you that she doesn't, and she will do solo interviews. But I would remind everyone that every major presidential ticket since 2004 has done a joint interview coming out of the convention. Our colleague Jesse Waters interviewed J.D. Vance and Donald Trump together coming out of their convention. It is well-honed practice that tickets often do a first interview after the convention or shortly thereafter together. And I guarantee you she will do interviews on her own. But let's just be clear. Republicans are complaining because they see her rising. They see voters liking what she's selling. And when you complain about logistics or strategy, tactics, you know you're losing. And I think Democrats feel pretty good about that today.
She's so good at what she does. Again, Jessica was no doubt very pleased by that performance. You know, this is something that I've stepped into the fray on social media as well. One of the complaints that we get quite a bit about Vice President Kamala Harris is that she's hiding from the press. There's no doubt that she has not rushed towards multiple televised interviews. Those are inevitable, right? They have to happen. And her campaign has made that abundantly clear. But also, as we've talked about in previous videos, she's winning the election, right? What we have a situation here is Republicans, right-wing media, and increasingly mainstream media, for various reasons, are wanting to set the agenda with the vice president, with the one who's winning. So Republicans and right-wing media want her to do more interviews in the hopes that she will say or do something that either can be construed as a failure or can be exploited for messaging and rhetorical benefit for the GOP, right? This idea is, okay, the more she's out there in public, the more likely she puts her foot in her mouth or says something that can be spliced a certain way. It creates more opportunity for mistakes. Donald Trump is a great example with this. The more he shows up in front of the media, the more it gives us the opportunity in political commentariat and others to point out where Donald Trump is weak. This is just anybody, right? The vice president is not taking the bait. She's not taking the bait. She's probably thinking, well, the energy's on my side, the fundraising is on my side, the polls are on my side. I will eventually have to do interviews, but I'm going to do them on my terms. I'm going to be strategic about it. And so she did her sit-down interview with Governor Tim Walz just a few days ago. I was very candid about it. I thought it was like an average performance. I don't think it was terrible. I don't think it was particularly great. I think she had a rocky start to the first question. But I will say several of questions she knocked out of the park. And when you consider the questions that were asked, they were pretty tough. This idea that it was a softball interview. No. They were very challenging questions. What about all these flip-flops that you've done, Madam Vice President? Republicans are complaining about it. Basically, many of the questions were effectively Republican talking points that Dana Bash asked. And she forced the vice president to contend with him. The vice president did all right. She also, in one of the biggest ones, not only asked the vice president about Gaza, which of course is an incredibly contentious issue just globally and also politically within the Democratic Party, she effectively asked her to contradict her current boss, the current president of the United States, Joe Biden. That's not a softball question. Okay, but despite all of this, that's a tradition of the vice president, or excuse me, the presidential candidate and their running mate doing a sit-down joint interview, as Marie Harf says, since 2004. So people who are complaining about that, then why didn't they complain when J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did it? Unless, of course, you're on principle. Now, if your complaint is she should do more interviews, fine. But don't whine that she had her first major interview after the election be a joint interview with her and Governor Walz. And so I think it was really good that Marie Harf pushed back on that and shut down that particular bad faith talking point. In this other clip I'm going to show you, Marie Harf also makes a point to point out that President Biden, Vice President Harris, Governor Walz, and the Democratic Party as a whole take much more seriously and have a much better record of addressing, poverty and child poverty and family concerns here in America than do the Republican Party, despite the Republican Party's rhetoric.
I think this is actually at heart a question about what we want our government money spent on. I mean, Lee is right. Nothing is free in Washington. We all know that. What Democrats will say during this election is we want to put government resources into helping out people with a child tax credit, right? Helping out people with child care, helping kids get a good education, helping kids have enough to eat, helping people who are part of this predatory, in many cases, loan system where they will never be able to buy a car or a house because they are saddled with this debt. Those things, by the way, help grow the economy. So I think Democrats will say we would rather put government resources to helping. And look, side note, much of the student loan debt relief goes to middle and lower income Americans. It's actually designed to help people who make less. Under that system, we would rather put money to help people raise kids, feed their kids, pay for college, than give tax breaks to the wealthy, which we know as of this week that the estimates about how much extending Donald Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations would cost the American people explodes the debt and deficit more than any of these programs that you are talking about. I think this is.
And she's even getting praise for it. Did you hear that, Marie? That was very smooth. That was very good, right? She's even getting props from her Trump-supporting co-host because she has the facts on her side and she's able to weave them together in a persuasive narrative. So yeah, obviously the context for this is that Republicans have yet again attempted to block an attempt by President Biden to provide student loan forgiveness for millions of Americans. The context is, of course, what she's saying is the broader narrative of the Democratic Party is to try to provide relief for struggling Americans and American families. And even the points about the child tax credit, it's funny, while she was talking, I remembered so vividly, this was last year, Harris Faulkner, a Fox News host, a Trump-supporting Fox News host, complained that the Biden-Harris administration allowed child poverty to double on their watch. And for context, what that was child poverty had been cut in half under the Biden-Harris administration because of the enhanced child tax credit, which was part of President Biden's American Rescue Plan. So that was a partisan bill. No Republican voted for it. And one of its many positive effects is that it cut child poverty in half by enhancing the child tax credit. 50 Republicans in the United States Senate and one Democrat, Joe Manchin, refused to renew the enhanced child tax credit when it expired at the end of 2022. So that's on 50 Republicans and one Democrat. So obviously the vast majority of the responsibility goes to the Republican Party for failing to do this because Democrats, for the vast majority, were on board to enhance it. As a consequence of the enhanced child tax credit expiring because of Republicans for political reasons, child poverty was no longer cut in half, which means it started to double again. And Fox News, particularly Harris Faulkner, was trying to blame the Biden-Harris administration. How could they possibly have done this? Well, no, lady, your party, your cult did this on purpose. They want children to starve because they know it can be used as a political cudgel against the Democrats. And so I think it's really good that Marie Harf is providing a fact check to the selective memories of the Fox propaganda network who struggle to remember that it's actually Democrats who have repeatedly, exhaustively pursued making it easier for American families. She also talks about feeding America's youth. Now, we'll remind you, as the governor of Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz, Vice President Harris's running mate, passed into law with a one-seat majority. He leveraged power so decisively over the objections of his Republican legislators in the minority. He passed a law in Minnesota so that every child attending public school in Minnesota gets free lunch and breakfast. He is feeding children in Minnesota, come hell or high water. And if Republicans won't work with him, if they try to get in his way, he brute forces through them politically. That is the kind of attitude that a Harris-Walz administration needs to have. Tim Walz is showing it. Tim Walz is demonstrating it. It's a wildly popular both in terms of Minnesota and just at the federal level, 50 states, feeding hungry kids tends to be pretty damn popular. What you have to have is not only the sufficient majorities to make it happen, but the will. This is why it's incumbent on us to not only put Vice President Harris and Governor Walz in the White House, but also give them a Democratic majority in both chambers, both of the House and the Senate. It's vital. And then they have to have the will to say, okay, even if we don't have the 60 votes, for example, to get over the filibuster in the Senate, then we'll just nuke the filibuster on that specific issue or in general, if need be. We will try to work with Republicans in good faith. But if they're in the minority, then we have the power and we're not going to let them dictate the agenda. We're going to give them a chance. Hey, you want to work with us? You have some things you want to concern. That's fine. But you will not obstruct us. And we will brute force through you politically if need be. We will overcome the filibuster. We will have party line votes. We will do what we need to do politically and electorally and legislatively to make things better for American families, including conservative families in red states. Love that energy. Love the fact checks from Marie Harf. Again, making Jessica Tarlov very proud. Hope to see more of her on Fox. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.